We got a lot of NBA to get into, and I'm very interested to talk to Keith Smith. Yahoo Sports covers the NBA. We got a lot to talk about, including Ben Simmons, the Sixers, what's going on with Kawhi, what's happening in the NBA with Keith Smith, Yahoo Sports, right here on the Sports Bash Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Keith, welcome back. What's up, buddy?
Hey, I'm good. I don't want to talk NBA. Let's talk weighted blankets a little bit more.
Are you familiar with the product?
I have a weighted blanket that I sleep with quite often, and I really enjoy it.
Wait, you got the Comfort Calming blanket?
I don't know if that's the brand I have, but I do have a weighted blanket, and it's really nice.
Now, what weight is your blanket?
Dude.
I'm not sure. My mother-in-law actually got it for me for Christmas last year, and I don't sleep under it every night, but the nights I do think I probably get a better night's rest than I do when I don't. So probably should be using it every night.
How am I the minority here, guys? How am I the one left out?
You
this
picked
is
number
crazy.
41. You're in minority there, too.
Yeah, I know.
I like it.
Shocking.
Well, I just ordered mine. Mine's 25 pounds. My girlfriend doesn't know that I got her one. If she's listening, guess what? You're getting one. Hers is 15 pounds. Because I said if I put a 25-pound blanket on her, she wouldn't be able to get it off. All right, let's get to Keith and some thoughts on the NBA. I saw you tweet the other day regarding Ben Simmons, year number 3, and there's a lot of people who are starting to get a little restless. They saw the videos. He has come out and said he's confident now. He was asked, well, what if teams give you the shot? And he says, I'm going to take it. Are you starting to be skeptical that Ben Simmons will evolve his game to that next level?
I am a little bit as far as him shooting jump shots because I'm just not seeing him do anything to back it up. Now, he hasn't had a ton of opportunity. They're playing him in slightly different spots on the floor when he's off the ball. He's been spaced to the corners more than just kind of hanging out up above the break at the top of the arc, which is a different look, or hanging out in that dunker spot right around the lane. But, I don't expect the guy to come down, dribble up, and start taking pull-up threes. That's too much to expect. My bigger issue with Ben Simmons is whether he shoots jump shots or not. I thought hopefully this year we were past the whole I'm barely going to be noticeable that I'm on the floor kind of stuff. And I know people are, he had 7 steals. Well, 5 of those were plays that were thrown directly into his hand. Dario Saric looked like he thought he was still on the Sixers to start that game the other night. And I thought Simmons was going to be past those moments where you didn't even know he's on the floor. I thought he'd be a night in, night out impact guy. And sometimes maybe I guess we're just going to still get these games where he just kind of drifts out there.
Yeah, I mean, you tweeted that, it was one of those nights where he was just kind of there because – he started the season with a great game against Boston, and it looked like, hey, this guy's more aggressive. And I was like, look, yeah, that's great, but we've seen him be more aggressive against the Nets in the playoffs in various games. Look, the guy's been great. But for him to be elite, he's got to take it to that next level. And I think watching that game, my concern, Keith, was you had Monty Williams, who was around Ben Simmons, and almost knew and challenged him. I don't believe the rhetoric you were throwing out that you're going to shoot the ball and I'm going to stick Aaron Baines and drift off you because I know who Ben Simmons is, and he's not going to shoot. That's what the red flag went up for me, was who the coach was on the other side. He knew Simmons. He challenged him, and Simmons wasn't up for the challenge.
Yeah, there's definitely something probably to that, and I think in Baines, you have a guy who has a couple of years of experience going against him, has a pretty good understanding of how Boston has played him and guarded him in the past. And in those nights when Embiid's not going to be there, and let's face it, there's going to be plenty of those nights throughout the course of the year, whether it be for rest or other reasons. You just can't have him just, again, float through these games and not have an impact. I don't want to overreact to it too much because team's still, 5-1. He played pretty well in all the other games, and everybody's going to have a bad one once in a while. But I'd almost rather see him have a bad one where he has a bunch of turnovers and misses shots than have a bad one where he's kind of invisible.
Well, real quick, this isn't about the 5-1 they lost. I don't think the panic is, this team's not. We know this team's going to. I think it's the big picture. Can this team get to where it needs to get to, or where people want them to get? even if he's a better version of what he's been, is that good enough?
I think a better version of what he's been, sure. I think that's definitely good enough. I think you can then have a guy who is going to be consistently there night to night and making plays every single game. You cannot have another playoff game where he scores 1 point like he did against the I believe, I forget who it was, a couple years ago, maybe Boston in the playoffs. You can't have another playoff game like that. Otherwise, you're not going to win those games. That's what my worry is in the playoffs, where you can develop a specific game plan for a team, that we're going to start to see teams do that. And they're just going to say, you know what, you can talk and show us all the off-season videos of you shooting jump shots. Here we are playing 10, 15 feet off you and mucking up everything inside because we're just going to make it that hard on you offensively unless you actually do start taking some jumpers or making plays in other ways.
Yeah, and let's not forget, Keith, as you brought up, a few minutes ago, Embiid was not in the game against Phoenix, and that afforded the opportunity from the Phoenix Suns side of things to go that route as far as, their strategy in guarding Ben Simmons. But if everyone's healthy, I don't think many teams would have success operating like that with Embiid on the floor, with their big starting five on the floor like that. I think it'd be much more easier said than done. Am I a little bit off base with that, or do you agree? I mean, at the end of the day, Ben can still be this guy and get the team where they need to go.
Yeah, I think there's a handful of teams that can do that and make it really hard on Philadelphia. I think Milwaukee could do that. There's a couple teams in the Eastern Conference just because they're a little more uniquely suited to defending them than most teams in the league are going to be. Again, that size. It's just so hard to deal with, especially if they're committed to playing bully ball. And then if you've got Al Horford, who looks like he's going to take 5 or 6 3-pointers a game, that's also a different style. You're just kind of changing who spaces the floor and where. I think, though, when it matters, again, in the playoffs, when you're seeing a team anywhere from 4 to 7 times over the span of about 2 weeks, those teams are going to develop a game plan where they're going to be able to do some different things. And if you make him a complete non-factor because he's willing to be a non-factor, that's a problem. Now, if he's going to push the issue and force it, that makes things hard because you're going to have to adjust to that. You just can't let him be out there and just let him just kind of be the fifth guy on the court where you're not looking for much out of or expecting anything out of.
Yeah, you don't want a situation that we saw in the last year's postseason where it was Ben Simmons just hiding out in a corner where Jimmy Butler had it at the top of the key with Embiid or anything else like that. But two guys that are crucial to this offense, specifically in the half court, to take some pressure off Ben potentially, is Tobias Harris and Josh Richardson. Now, Tobias Harris, Keith, has had his best work when Embiid has not been on the floor or not been available for the Sixers. One, is that concerning to you? And what do you see there? And then part two, Josh Richardson seems to look lost, and he looks very similar to how Tobias looked last year when he first started playing with Philly.
Yeah, and I want to start with Richardson. I think that one's a little more understandable. He's a guy who had the ball in his hands a lot in Miami, was trusted to kind of be a primary playmaker for the Heat as they went through some of their injury issues over the last couple of seasons and the like. And I think now he's relegated to really being kind of an off-ball, spot-up guy, and that's going to take some real adjustment time, and some guys never can adjust to that. That's why I think it was a little oversold how much people immediately went to, well, Richardson is this good, and yeah, we lost J.J. Redick, but Richardson comes in and brings in all the scoring and passing and defense and all these things Redick doesn't do, but fit does matter, and J.J. Redick obviously fit around those guys so phenomenally because he was content to be that off-the-ball guy and do those things, and you lost the ability to run some of those actions where the defense really bent towards what Redick was doing, and that freed things up on the opposite side of the floor. Now, in the case of Harris, I think your problem with him is when he's playing that small forward position, he's not a guy who is overly known for getting down inside and beating up on smaller players. He's in a better spot when he can go against big guys, put it on the deck, and get by them and make plays off the dribble. And when he's in there, that's not his game. He's and is taking more of those outside shots versus a guy who is able to work against bigger players and use his skill and quickness ability to get past them. And I think that's where he struggles a little bit when the entire lineup is together.
Keith Smith, Yahoo NBA, covers the NBA, of course. And now you saw, you also, cover the Celtics and get to see them a lot. How do you see the differences in the way Boston used, I'm blanking on Horford, on Horford, on how Boston used Horford and how Philly's using Horford? Do you see discernible differences?
There are some things where I think Horford is being asked to play much more, especially when Embiid is in there. He's being asked to play far more of a perimeter-based game than he was when he was in Boston. I think in Boston it was a good mix for him of a lot of pick and pop type plays, as well as him being a guy who played inside quite a bit. They went to him regularly in the post, and I think that's a little bit of a difference. I think that's something that's different, where in Philly he's been much more of an outside player, a distributor from around the arc and those kind of things, and I think that's a little different. They also don't run a lot of pick and roll in Philadelphia, or even pick and pop, and that's somewhere where Horford really excels, so that's also very different also.
We're talking with Keith Smith about the Sixers, but there's a lot going on in the NBA. We'll check in on just a minute. And one thing I do want to throw about the Sixers is defensively. We saw Booker blast them the other night, and I know you went back and watched that game. He scores more points against the Sixers, 28 points a game now, than any other team other than Boston. And the only reason against Boston is because he scored 70 against them last year.
Yeah.
It's just a bad matchup. But did you like the way, they had Simmons on him late, and there was people wondering, should they have gone with Richardson? Or did you like the way this? I mean, obviously, whatever they've done with him has not worked. But what did you think in that particular game?
Yeah, I think their struggle. Well, in the past, I think the struggle was Phoenix, really, because Booker's such a central point for them. They made sure they worked him into the best matchup possible, and generally that was making sure they did everything they could to get him going against J.J. Redick. Now, I think what I liked what Philadelphia did was vary the approach. Like you said, they put Simmons on him some. Richardson got him some. I would have liked to seen him maybe use Thibault on him a little bit more, use that size, length, and quickness, and see what he could do to see if he could bother him. But there's some guys that I don't know if it's they get out there, they see that other colored jersey, and it's going to be a big night for me. And Booker's one of those guys, when he's out of the box, it's really, really tough to get him back in it.
They got the Rubio, too. I thought Rubio made a big difference in that game. Having him.
He was 3 of 5.
Yeah. Do you think that Suns team is, 8, 7, 6 seed material?
It's tough. I want them to be, because I want that for their fans. I want to see them play better. I want to see them get to that point. I'm just a little bit worried that that's not quite where they're at. Now, my thing with Rubio, what I thought he did great in that game was he really controlled the pace of that entire game. When it was time to play fast, he got it up the floor and they played fast. When it was time to slow it down and worked the clock a little, he slowed it down and worked the clock. I thought that's what he really excelled at, and that's not something you can just see out of looking at a box score. But when you watch the game, that's what I thought Rubio did. The biggest thing Phoenix has now is they have good quality role players, guys who know what their job is, and they just do that job, as well as they don't have all this overlap positionally. They used to be one of those teams that they went from having 7, 8 power forwards to then having a whole bunch of wings and all these rosters that didn't make sense. Now they're about 10 deep. They've got, good backups at each spot, and that's allowing them to stay competitive. Whether they're a playoff team or not, we'll see. It's just so tough in the Western Conference to crack that 8 spot. The Warriors look like they're going to fall out. I'm just not sure Phoenix is a team that's going to step in.
Yeah, Keith, you mentioned Phoenix role players, so let me switch it over to Philadelphia. I know I've asked you this before. We've talked to you about this as far as the 76ers depth. They lose J.J. Redick down in New Orleans, and Furkan is just one player coming off the bench there, although he got the start the other night, and 20 points. He was criticized at times by the fans and some media members that cover the team, but do you think he's someone that can have a legitimate role and become a legitimate threat from the outside to help with some spacing? And just talk a little bit about the overall depth of this Sixers team.
Yeah, I think Korkmaz can be that guy, and I'd like to see them continue to give him the opportunity to be that guy. I think, unfortunately, what's happened with him in his career is if it wasn't injuries, then what's happened is he has been ineffective for a game or two, and then he just kind of disappears from the rotation entirely. He's also, let's call it, maybe a little allergic to defending hard, which is obviously not going to fly with that group and with Brett Brown. If you're not getting out there and getting after it, that's a problem. Now, we all know J.J. Redick. No one's ever mistaken him for a good defender, but he always gave a solid effort on that end and tried, where Korkmaz at times has looked a little indifferent and a little lost. So I think if he's past that, I think you need to play him because you need that shooting ability in the group. Beyond that, I liked what Raul Neto gave them. I think sometimes having that little bit more of a traditional point guard option in Neto is something that can really help. Well, whether now he remains only a guy who's going to play when there's other guys out of the lineup, we'll see. I really like Thibault a lot. I think you're just the only thing you can rely on him for right now, though, is his defense. And then obviously Mike Scott, Kyle O'Quinn, those guys are just professionals, and they're more than solid for the 10 to 15 minutes a night. You need them in behind Joel Embiid and Al Horford up front. So, they're still a shooter short. I don't mean to be a broken record on that, but that's going to be the thing I'm going to go back to till they eventually find that extra shooter to help balance out the offense a little bit more.
All right. Tonight there's a very interesting conversation going on with the fact that the Clippers have decided to sit Kawhi Leonard, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know why this is big hoopla other than the fact that ESPN's probably ticked off that Kawhi is not playing on their network and he's going to play tomorrow night on TNT. But Doris Burke mentioned that, the NBA has a big problem, I think is the way she phrased it.
Yep.
Do you view it that way, that there is a big problem with this load management?
I think there is a growing problem. Let's put it that way. It's, as much as I have NBA League Pass and I'm flipping around to game after game all night long, there's still a large subset of NBA fans who only tune into the national TV games and then probably their local team. And when you have a big national TV game like Bucks Clippers and one of the prime guys is not going to be out there, you're just not getting the matchup you want. And then if people don't watch, the ratings fall. Then when the contract comes due, the networks are going to come back and say, hey, maybe, instead of $1 billion, maybe we go with $750 million. And in the end, that does affect the players because that's how the salary cap is set. It's a big chunk of that is those TV contracts. That's what caused the most recent cap spike. That said, I don't want to overreact to it too much because I'd rather have Kawhi Leonard healthy and ready to play for, 20 some odd playoff games or so versus being ready and healthy to play a game in early November. That's not, as impactful. That doesn't matter. So, as long as teams are kind of handling it the right way, that's something you got to think about. And then, of course, you always have the added factor of if you bought a ticket to a game, especially if it's a time when a team comes through only one time and one of those superstars isn't there, you have every right to be upset as a player because that's just something that, really makes it difficult for you because that might be your only shot to see that guy that year. Or some of these guys, as they're getting up there in age, like the LeBron James of the world, might be your last shot to see him, period.
Is it unfair to ask what has changed in terms of why could Allen Iverson, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird play every game, every minute? I saw R.J. Barrett. They said, he's playing so many minutes, we're going to sit him. And somebody responded to him like, Damon
Fizdale
Stoudemire.
Snapped.
I think it was Damon Stoudemire that said, I averaged 37 minutes a game as a rookie and played all 82. Like, is it ridiculous to suggest that these guys need this much load management?
I think a couple things have changed. The first is we're just smarter about these kind of things. We see it in all sports. We don't see baseball pitchers don't go out there and throw 150 pitches anymore because we know if you want to have them for 162 games and starting pitcher for 30, 35 starts, you can't be running them out there for 8 innings and 150 pitches a game. In the sport of basketball, the thing is we've looked at it, and one of the things that we see is rest does matter. It matters for these guys for longevity. I, as you guys know, I grew up in Boston. There's no bigger Larry Bird fan in the world than me. Maybe if the Celtics hadn't pushed Larry Bird so hard, or maybe it was just a different environment, we would have got more than a 10-year career out of Larry Bird than what we got, and that's including all the missed seasons where he had injuries and the like, because it's just, again, a different game. The other thing is these players play so much from a very young age. We see these AAU teams they're as young as 8 and 9 years old. These guys start at that age playing sometimes as many as 6, 7, 8 games in the course of a week. And then, maybe even more when it's high tournament season and the like. And that just continues year round all the way through their high school years till they finally get into college. And then it's in college we start to hear things like, wow, we only play 2 times a week. What happened? And that becomes almost that kind of balancing act there where teams are looking at it and saying, hey, we put a ton of miles on these kids by the time they're 18 years old. That's where by the time they get to the NBA, you're investing millions of dollars. So you're going to protect that investment any way you can because you want to have that guy for 10, 11, 12 years versus, 3 or 4 really great years and burn them out and run them out.
Keith, real quick with the load management stuff. We were talking about it earlier. I thought we saw something at some point, maybe in the offseason, about a policy or a new rule where teams could only list, load management as the reason X amount of times, or it has to be off a back-to-back. Do you have that rule? Can you clear that up?
Yeah, it wasn't X amount of times. What it is they want teams to be forthcoming and listen in advance if that's what the plan is so that fans can make those plans. They also, what they want is they really only do want to see it in back-to-backs or in a 4 games in 3 nights scenario, which that's not too many of those. But in the case of Kawhi Leonard, what they clarified today is this is a load management thing related to an injury. He has both the quad condition that is known, as well as it sounds like he's dealing with a knee injury. Now you can throw up your arms and say, that's baloney, and that's probably some truth to that and some fairness in there as well. But I think what the NBA is saying is when it's just a case of guys going to sit, we really don't want to see guys just sitting, random games for no reason, especially if it's a national TV game. That's, I think, why they came out and clarified today through Adrian Wojnarowski, someone from the league, I believe was the league spokesman, came out and said, hey, Kawhi's working through something, and the Clippers are trying to take care of him. That's why we don't have a problem in this specific scenario.
Keith Smith, and of course, we talk NBA with him every Wednesday here on the Sports Bash, and we're very, very early into the season. What'd you make of, by the way, Jimmy Butler's comments the other day?
About Philadelphia and why he left and all that. Yeah, I think with Jimmy Butler, he's just the kind of guy I'm starting to get the sense of, is this guy ever going to be really happy anywhere? And is it always going to have been, he's just starting to scream to me is it's always someone else's fault. And I was taught from a young age, it might be somebody else's fault one time, but once you're on time 2, it's been past that time 3 and time 4, It's time to take a look in the mirror. And that's what I feel like with Jimmy Butler. I feel like he's always got a reason why, it's somebody else's fault and why he's unhappy. And maybe he was just referencing Philly saying, hey, we're not giving you the full 5-year max. We're not even going to go to the 4-year max for you or whatever the case is. And that's just, in a lot of ways, that's a basketball decision. He's an older guy now. They're not, old, but he's getting up there. He's on the wrong side of 30. He's got a lot of mileage, a lot of injury history. And maybe that's what he is. This is a guy who I think looks for motivation in any place he can find it, in any kind of perceived slight that he sees. He's going to make sure everybody knows about it.
I know you're in Orlando, Keith Smith. What's the word on Fultz and how he's looked?
He's looked really, really good. He has had some very good games where he's played really well. He's had some games where he's, up and down a little bit, as, is to be expected from a guy who missed an entire year of basketball. So I think I know they are thrilled with him. They love him. They recently moved him into the starting 5 a couple games back. So now he's really seemed to got kind of a hold on that starting point guard role. And that's really important for the Magic because they don't have a lot of guys who can create their own offense, especially off the dribble. And that's something that Fultz can do and do quite well. So I think they are, really looking forward to him continuing to improve and continue to get better. And the other thing that's really standing out, which we saw glimpses of in his time in Philadelphia, this guy's a really good defender and he can really get after it. He's strong. He's really fast. He's, got good quickness. He's got pretty good hands. He's got good length. And we're really starting to see that show up as well. So, future is very, very bright for Markelle Fultz. And now it's just about continuing to stay healthy and stay on the court and continue to put it together.
All right. At Keith Smith NBA, Yahoo NBA, and of course here every Wednesday on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Keith Smith, our guest here on the Sports Bash. Thank you, pal.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. We'll talk to you next week.